sure a lot of you guys here at Fullerton College have been to a ton of college parties, and if you're just a freshman out of high school, I'm sure you've been to a lot of high school parties. Travis Cook from Yahoo actually states that the #1 food item brought to college parties are chips and salsa. And luckily for me, I work at Esther's Taco House. It's a Mexican restaurant, and it's mandatory to know the salsa, how to make the salsa we use there. So Taylor Hawk from Yahoo claims that the #1 food condiment in the U.S. before ketchup is salsa. So in this speech, I will demonstrate how to make salsa. First, I will demonstrate which vegetables to use and how to pick out the right ones. Second, I will demonstrate how to cut them and make the salsa chunky rather than way liquidy. And third, I will demonstrate which food items to use to eat the salsa with. So start off with tomatoes. I picked out the red and smaller size tomatoes so you don't have to grab the bigger ones and you don't have to cut them as much as throw them in the blender. You're going to need 1 white onion. Typically we don't use red onions at Esther's. I don't know why, but just the white onions taste better and it's not too strong of a flavor. You're going to need a head of cilantro. You're going to need 1 lime as well. And then you're going to need, it depends typically up to you how spicy you want it. But in this case, I just grabbed jalapenos instead of serranos because serranos are pretty hot and I'm not sure if a lot of you guys like spicy salsa. So with the tomatoes, usually I cut the pointy part off right here, and then I just cut them in half, and I throw them in the blender like that. So then you're just gonna have to keep cutting each one, and then cut it in half. Normally with the tomatoes, you're supposed to dice them and cube them up, but since I have a blender here, it's gonna save us time, and then it saves us time at work, because usually at work you're supposed to take 20 minutes to make the salsa, but it usually takes way longer than that because, I don't know, you have to dice them up and there's no blender. So I'm going to put that in the blender, and usually I pulse it because if you use any of these, it's going to basically make it liquid. So rather than doing that, just pulse it, and then just click it a couple times. But I'm pretty sure these tomato slices are too big, so you're going to have to cut them again in half. And then usually it should grate up, but if not, you're just going to demonstrate cutting them up and dicing them by myself rather than using a blender. So just keep pulsing it. Okay, so this blender doesn't want to cooperate with me. So I'll put the tomatoes into this container, and then I'll just dice them up myself. Usually at Esther's, it's okay, like we have really chunky salsa, and we have a really spicy salsa, so it's easier to use the blender, but rather right here, it's okay to make them chunky. And then I'll cut the jalapenos now, cut the stem off, and then usually cut them in half because, I usually cut them into thicker slices because I don't know, people like the chunky part of it. And I'll just use 1 jalapeno for right now because those are actually pretty big slices, and if I use any more jalapenos, it'll be really spicy. For the cilantro, cut all the I would say the head. Use only the head of this part. Don't use the stems because this part won't actually. You can't cut them up into tiny pieces. It's way harder to use. So just cut it off like that. And this you can just trash it because you're not going to need it throughout the whole salsa. And then use tiny pieces of cilantro because cilantro always takes up most of the flavor throughout the whole salsa. And for this small portion, I won't use all the cilantro because it will take up all the flavor. So I'll just put a handful of cilantro in the salsa. And that's it for the cilantro. And then for the onion, make sure to take off all the skin around it. And it's easier to cut off one end like that, and then this end right here. And then you cut it in half, and the skin comes off really easy. You just take the first layer of the onion off, and all the skin will be off the onion like that. And then usually for Esther salsa, we use 4 whole onions, but right now I'll just use half an onion and I'll dice it up really into small pieces because it's really pretty gross actually if you get one whole bite of a whole onion that takes away the whole salsa. You just cut it into small pieces, and then you cut it again into there, and then you can throw it into the salsa like that. And then lastly, you're going to need, at Esther's we use 2 limes, and I bought the biggest lime at Seder Brothers just because I'm sure that you can get more lime juice in there. So get a lime, squeeze it into the salsa, and typically this is the last part because if you put the bottom on the bottom of the salsa, it won't go throughout the whole salsa. So you try to get all the mixture in, you try to get all the greens and all the reds in, you mix the lime in, and then that will be the end of that. And then usually we use a cup of salt at Esther's, and one time my first day working there, I was making a whole thing of salsa there. I added 2 cups, and I almost got fired because we had to feed that to the customers hated it. So, and I passed the test saying I knew how to make salsa, so therefore I lied to them and almost lost my job making a pretty crappy salsa. So you add the salt, and you add a little. I just grabbed a dash of pepper because usually it's already spicy enough. So you just grab a little pinch of pepper and put the pepper in there. And then throughout, you have to mix the salsa up. Mix the salsa up. And then the final product actually should look like this. But since the blender didn't work and I couldn't cut it all up, the final product should look like that, but mine's a little extra chunkier than most salsas. So, in this speech, I have chips because if you go to college party, you always need something to eat the salsa with, and everyone always just brings chips and salsa since it's the easiest thing to bring to bring to parties. So chips and salsa is the number one thing brought at college parties. So you guys can try this salsa, not this one. This one didn't come out as chunky as I wanted it to come out. So in the speech I demonstrated how to make Esther salsa. I demonstrated which ingredients to use, how to pick out the right ones, and then how to try and cut them and use a blender, but the blender wasn't cooperating. Thank you.